right, we're going to call to order the October 18th, 2022 meeting of the McMinnville Water and Light Commission. We're going to start this evening with a roll call. And Trina, will you please do the roll call?
Yes, Mayor Dropkin.
Here.
Commissioner Tankersley.
Here.
Commissioner Gormley.
Here.
Commissioner Christensen.
Here.
Commissioner Tate.
Here.
Thank you. You all have a consent agenda in your packet, including minutes, a bucket truck purchase contract, and an insurance release form. And I would entertain a motion to pass or approve the consent agenda.
I'd so move with just the understanding that the mayor, when she's in town, has to take the first ride in a bucket truck. What? No.
Agreed.
Okay, I have a motion from Charlie and a second from, I believe, Commissioner Christensen. It's a little,
Yes.
who I couldn't hear. I'm sorry. It's a difficult.
Yes, I second.
Okay, and I'm happy to take the rides in the bucket. I've been up, in two of them already.
Well, it's
60.
a brand new one, all the better. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. I can't wait. Wonderful, thank you. And then you have our accounts payable.
Do we need to take a vote?
Oh, my goodness, details. Yes, those important details. I have a motion and a second. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And all opposed, nay. Motion passes unanimously. You have a payable and purchasing report in your packet as well. Have all the commissioners had an opportunity to review? And is there any dialogue or questions from
No
that?
questions here. No questions.
No questions.
Thank you. And next we have a forest management contract in front of us, and I think we'll go to our general manager, John Dietz, to introduce and discuss this topic.
So, Brent, you want to? Sure.
Sorry, Brent, I apologize. Wrong person.
Oh, this is for my report.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Thank you, Mayor. Well, both 2022 stumpage sales are wrapped up for the year, the west and the east power line sales. So that looks real good and had a real good outcome, I think, going forward for fire mitigation. And we're just finishing up the final road maintenance and silviculture projects associated with those sales. We're going to cut out real close, come out real close on value and volume with the original estimates for the sale. So about 2 million feet on both sales is the cutout. 1.3 million on Powerline West, 1.8 million on Powerline East. Fire season was real favorable this year. We only got, I think, to a level 3 fire for less than a week at one point. We're back to a level 1. It is, be curious if we get clear to November with fire season. I saw the latest from ODF. They're probably they'll just keep it at a 1 until we get some moisture here. So, because it is a little getting to be unseasonably dry for this time of year. So I think like that late wet spring just delayed the 3 months of summer basically until October. So, but just the same, while we're working out there, we've still got all our fire equipment and we are prepared. Next month, at next month's meeting, I'll present the 2022 program review, 2023 harvest recommendations, and the proposed MB&G budget for 2023, the November meeting. So, any questions?
Looks like you have spent hours developing a new logo.
You like that? I can't imagine what the firm spent picking out a leaf like that. Yeah, this kind of came about as part of the 100th year
Cool.
anniversary, which was last year. So.
Good for you.
So are you gonna switch us to hardwoods instead of?
Yeah, I would have preferred it. They didn't ask me about this aspen leaf, but Maybe it looks softer than a drug. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you for the report. Continuing on with staff reports, we have a staff report from Chad Hudson. Yeah.
Do we have any experience requests?
Oh, yes, thank you. I didn't see any in the packet. I should have asked. Do we have any appearance requests? Not in advance. And then do you typically ask your gallery also if any, at this moment, for anybody? No, they would be submitted in advance, Trina, appearance requests?
Yes, they would be submitted in advance.
Great. Thank you. Now to staff reports, Chad Hudson, please.
Everybody wants to hear about a fuel station more than that, right? Yes.
I
You raise the bucket?
your
Yes.
report. I love the way that your report's put out.
Oh.
I may be copying. Which is a form of
I
flattery.
copied it too, so. I ain't too proud.
Well, I'll give you due credit, but yeah,
Thank you.
really great.
Yeah, since the last one, we're really close. So I'm kind of reading my update that I sent over. Today, yesterday we put fuel in the tanks. So we have fuel in the tanks now. We're out there testing today. So they got all the dispensers calibrated. And we're starting to kind of work on the car block. So we're getting really close to actually being quote unquote substantially complete and be able to actually use the station. So that's exciting. It's been a little bit bumpy towards the end on some of the peripheral stuff as far as like the sidewalk and that kind of stuff, but we are getting there. So we're really close. They're actually they had to tear out a little bit of sidewalk on the south side right by the customer service parking lot. Didn't meet city requirements, so they'll be doing that this Friday, weather permitting, and then the week after they're going to be doing asphalt. So after that, we're going to be really scaring it. So we're getting there. Can be under budget, not on time exactly, but we're getting there. It's been a good project.
So Chad, the dispensers, strictly gallonage is all you see? Correct. So if some event takes place, we've got to help the city with fuel on that, then we'll probably have to use gallons and whatever our last price we paid for fuel might be, whatever the current. But yeah, on the next price. Yep, the next price again.
Yeah. And so the dispensers you see there, the one on the far right, it's that tall skinny one, that's a high velocity or high volume dispenser. And that's for our tanker truck. So if we have to go to the treatment plant and fill the generator, that's what that's for. It's
Okay.
50 gallons a minute. So.
Very good, nice job.
So in the case of an emergency, when you say city, and you mean fire, police, public works?
I'm thinking about some event that would
Right.
cause
Cascadia,
them an
right,
inability to secure fuel.
Right.
Well, at one time we wanted to be our partner, but it never worked out. But in the end, I think we will probably have to
As I
help out.
understand it, we tried to
We did.
talk to them about this and they've been too busy.
so
And I would think that our first priority is we have to keep the lights on and the water flowing. So we would make sure we had enough for our people, and then if we had extra, then we would.
So the fire department's got some storage on site. I don't know if the cops use that or not, but I'm just thinking that really, the reality is we may have the only fuel source that would be available to our
Yeah.
our
And I
city.
don't-
So I mean.
just from an
really,
emergency preparedness standpoint, I think it's good to have things at least memorialized before the event. You do not want to be exchanging business cards at the point of emergency. And I think the city has maybe had some conversations. I think I've been privy to conversations
We
around
did
emergency
when-
preparedness.
Mike was there and then we really haven't had.
And it's often led by the county, but I do think as we sort of, this is an asset and in an emergency preparedness, you want to identify the asset. Obviously maintain this enterprise's services, but we also want to make sure that we have some sort of process for others, and sort of the ring of
Right.
service.
I think that would be great, but if something blows up tomorrow and they need help, I think we're committed to
Right.
making that happen.
Right, I
also.
know we're good partners.
But Ed, I think that you should be careful that you don't lull them into a false sense of security by telling them they're taken care of when we may not have enough capacity to take care of us and what their needs will be. So I think it needs to be looked at rather than just say to the city, don't worry about it, we've got you covered.
I'm not saying that.
I
I'm
know,
saying that if
but-
the world go up tomorrow, that's all.
Okay, but what I'm
The
saying.
world's gotta go up.
But what I'm saying is, even if we get this catastrophe, I don't think it's fair for us to tell the city that, don't worry about it, we've got you covered when we may not.
Well, I don't think we're looking for any action item for any
No.
direct conversation going to the city out of this. This is a progress report. It sounds like good progress is made. I know the county is hosting an emergency management conference at the end of the month. I've asked that we have city staff representation there. So, you know, emergency management is something we think about as a city. It's certainly something not that the city, the other portions of the city are not as far along as Water and Light is, and it's commendable how far along Water and Light is and how prepared Water and Light has set up and has intentionally set itself up to be. But I don't think we need to get too concerned or too in the weeds of talking about some sort of communication with the city when we're not looking for any type of action item like that at this time.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Mayor. At the end of the month, you said the county's hosting an emergency management meeting. Is that for city government officials only or partners?
It is for
It's a-
partners. There
I
were
think they
many
call it-
people on the,
When,
I'm
it's the
sorry.
winter preparedness meeting, I think is what it is, the October 25th.
Okay,
yes.
thank you. Appreciate that.
And I assume Water and Light also has representation that'll be at that meeting.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank
So
you.
that is a good start. We have recently dusted off our emergency. Well, there's a copy of our city emergency management plan literally sitting on my desk right now. You could walk into City Hall and see it there. It is actually due for review at the city of McMinnville. We did consider funding an emergency management position with our ARPA dollars, but ultimately the McMinnville City Council chose not to fund any regular salaried positions with those one-time dollars. And it is an identified need at the city of McMinnville, is continued emergency management preparation. And hopefully, as we continue to move forward here, we can, I think Mike's been gone from the city now for a couple of years, even though they've been a fast couple of years. So hopefully as we move forward here, we can get everybody on the same page and working and talking together about what type of emergency preparedness does look like for other functions of the city, and if the city would be coming to Water and Light in the future, et cetera. So I think we're in a good position to start those conversations anew.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments?
Yeah, great job, Chad.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Excellent.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And next, I believe we're inviting Jamie Phillips to come up and present.
Thank you. Good evening. I'd like to provide a brief update on our conservation program and the achievements of the past year. We wrapped up the first year of the 2-year BPA rate period last month, and about halfway through the 2-year rate period, we've spent approximately 54% of our allocation, our $1.6 million. And that has reached over 190 customers with those measures. Kilowatt hour savings of 2.9 million kilowatt hours. So for some context, that's enough power for about 200 average residential homes in our community for a year. So we're proud of that. A large part of that is due to our direct install program, which offers LED lighting to customers, whole house change out of lighting, as well as a few other options. A new one that we started offering last month is Nest thermostats at no cost to the customer. Those are fully covered by BPA and the energy efficiency program. So that has been received well. We distributed 96 of those in the first month.
Were they installed by the service company we use?
No, the customer is responsible for installation.
It's just, here's the device, it's up to you to get installed.
Right,
Okay.
and we don't offer any
Yeah, close it. That's involved. in stuff.
programs behind that. It's simply the thermostat, and they can do with it what they'd like.
So Jimmy, I mean, LED lighting, is that offered to everybody like it was before, or is it just low income now?
So we've targeted multifamily housing, apartment complexes, mobile home parks, and in an effort to potentially reach out to some of our lower income customers and promote our other measures that are offered. And that has seen some results. We've been able to contact those customers and share with them what we offer. We offer a whole home audit, energy audit, free of charge, so the customers can have an idea of what they may need or what they could take advantage of.
And so if it qualifies, then we go in like we did before, the contractor does, and they change all the light bulbs to LEDs. Is that, it doesn't cost the customer anything?
Doesn't cost the customer anything. And there's no pre-qualification for that. It's if the customer wants it, we will provide it. And that program alone has resulted in about half of those kilowatt hour savings, 1.8 million kilowatt hours, just in changing out light bulbs.
Right.
Yes. We've also seen notable increase in our conservation loan program. We addressed the interest rate on that loan, lowered it a couple of years ago, and increased the
I'm sorry.
cap.
How do you make it slide just for the microphone? It's really hard to hear you.
Trina
just changed it.
Yeah, but we'll have
Oh.
a hard time hearing Sam if we do that.
Okay.
Okay.
So if you see the interruption here. Trina's a little closer to you. There we go. Sorry about. Yeah, thank you. That's just for you, Sam.
All right, Ted, you want to test it before we go back?
I sound All right.
Thank you, Ted.
So we've been able to provide over $170,000 in loans to customers to achieve their conservation projects. Also want to mention that we have targeted our low income incentives and trying to promote those more in different avenues, and we're able to serve 16 separate customers with $110,000 of incentives there. So seeing some consistent interest in programs, and we'll continue through the next year of the rate period to promote the programs and reach out via our community partners. We've had great success with St. Vincent de Paul. We work with YCAP. Head Start is a new one that we've started working with, and Housing Authority is a great partner as well. So that's sort of the plan for the coming year, and we hope to continue to be able to offer incentives to our customers, and be aware of any new things coming down the road, which right now there aren't many. So
Great.
we're happy to be able to spend the money at this point. The market's pretty well saturated in McMinnville as far as conservation measures. So.
Thank you.
Good news.
Are there any questions for,
No.
are there any questions for Jamie?
No.
Thank you so much. And next Mr. Justice, are you presenting this, or?
I think we have James
James
Berg,
Berg.
our engineering and operations director. I hope I'm speaking loud.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Justice. All right, I got a brief update on the Zone 2 pump building upgrades. So going back to February of 2022, we entered into an extension agreement with West Hills Properties for design of Zone 2 pump upgrades to that building. In May of 22, Commission approved the award for the design. So this project's 100% funded from the developer. We've been managing that project. It's been awarded to Jacobs Engineering. So we've been meeting since, with the developer since June. We had our kickoff meeting, went through, talked about the scope, talked about kind of where we're going with the project itself, what it entailed, talked about budget and deliverables. In October, we received our 90% design. So going off of our extension agreement, at that point, we received a construction cost estimate. And as part of our agreement, we give that estimate to the developer to make a choice whether you want to proceed with, going out to bid. That's their first option, to opt out of the agreement or not. So they have 14 days to respond to our entering cost estimate, and that's been delivered to, and that was on October 13th. So we've been in communication with the developer. They're going to be reviewing that document and getting back to us whether they want to go out and solicit bids or just basically hold the design for future. If they want to go out and solicit bids, we will do that, and that will take place it's like in February of 23. So we'll go out for bid and proceed at that point. When the bids come in, they'll have another option whether to accept bids or reject bids. If they proceed with construction, right now the schedule looks like it'd be completed in 2024 fall. So with that being said, we have some challenges within this project itself, just with the timeframes. I think you've heard about some of the challenges we have with lead times, cost increases. So we've been working with the developer on those and keeping them informed of some of those challenges. Also, I think on their end, the housing market is kind of slowing down too. So we'll see what decisions they make on their end. Next commission meeting in November, I can come back and give you another update on just where we're at and what direction they decided to go. But at this point, that's the information I have for you on the Zone 2. If you have any questions, I can answer those at this time.
James, how are we recovering our overhead related to the work your department might be doing or other people, or is that?
Yeah, that's all captured in the extension agreement.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we've got our job costs is keeping track of
Everything. Yeah. So like, for example, we're putting in some of the pipe that's being captured in that extension agreement as well, our self-performed work.
Okay. But our managing of all
Yes,
this.
it's captured in there as well.
Good, thank you.
Yeah. Any questions?
That's exciting.
It is. It's a.
I won't be surprised.
We started these talks when I came here in 2018. They continue on. So yeah. All right.
Well, yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mr. Burt.
All right. Thank you.
Next, we've got on old business, city service charge discussion. Are there any updates, Mr. Dietz?
Probably just a couple of brief updates. I know that NISC has started work on the project. I think they're going to be looking for some general ledger accounts from us so that they can build the division in the software. And then they'll start testing the division in that software probably in the next couple of weeks, I would guess. So that's pretty much where we're at right now.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Mr. Dietz? Okay, then we will go into new business. We'll start with Ms. McManus. Do you have a the BDS plan? Yeah.
I do, yes. So tonight we're going to be talking with BDS Planning and Urban Design. At the August 16th, 2022 commission meeting, the commission approved a personal services contract with BDS Planning and Urban Design for development of a 5-year strategic plan. So that contract has been executed and BDS has started work on the project. We have 3 representatives from BDS here with us tonight. We have Brian Scott, Jacqueline Robinette, and Andres Mantilla. And they spent the afternoon here at Water and Light meeting with staff and touring our facilities. So Brian, Jacqueline, and Andres are going to introduce themselves and give an overview of what we can expect throughout the strategic planning process over the next couple of months. So Brian, please go ahead.
Good afternoon, commissioners and mayor. Good to see you. Brian Scott with BDS Planning. As Trina mentioned, I'm with my colleagues Andres Mantilla and Jacqueline Robinette. We're here launching your strategic planning process with your staff and with you, and we want to engage you in a bit of a discussion for a few minutes after a little bit of introduction about the overall process. Our firm has been around for about 15 years. A big portion of our work is facilitating strategic plans for public agencies and nonprofit organizations. So this is right in our wheelhouse. Some of you, the mayor and others, will remember me from being here working with the city a few years ago on a strategic plan for the city of McMinnville, which is part of the reason this was interesting to us when we saw the request for proposals for a consultant on this project. And I personally have had some relationship with McMinnville since you had a young fellow named Ed Gormley as the mayor. I helped Jeb Ladine when he was setting up the McMinnville Downtown Association back in the 1980s, and then helped coach that organization for many years when I was working on downtown revitalization statewide in Oregon. So it's been a great pleasure to have an opportunity to come back to McMinnville now and then for, I don't even want to think about how many years that adds up to. So it's a delight to be here with you this evening. I have a few slides to kind of go over our process. But let me give Andres and Jacqueline a chance to introduce themselves.
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. Commissioners, Mayor, thank you for having us. My name is Jacqueline Robinette, and I'm the organizational development lead at the firm. So I play a leadership role in all of our organizational development and strategic planning projects like this one. For this project, I'll be supporting Andreas and partnering with him in project management and co-facilitation of the strategic planning process over the next few months.
And my name is Andres Mantilla. I'm a principal at BDS Planning. My role as project director for this work moving forward is going to be spending a lot of time in group settings with you, but also in one-on-one settings and time that we're going to be able to kind of really dig into details as to what you want to see as part of the strategic goals for the plan here moving forward. So happy to be here and look forward to the conversation.
Welcome aboard.
Thank you. I wanted to just talk briefly about the strategic planning process, and then I have some questions for you about strategic questions you may have and major issues. Moving on to the next slide, we just introduced ourselves. I won't do that again. The strategic planning process has 3 phases: an assessment of who and where the organization is, a plan for where do you want to go, and implementation. How are you going to get there? We're right at the beginning of the process in the leadership number 1 there on the left. Next slide, please. And there you can see there's a little red square around where we are in the process. And we're going to come back to the commission 3 more times at the end of each of these phases. During the assessment phase, we're going to take a look at where the organization is and what are the key issues. We'll come back with a sense of that and work with you to identify what are the strategic priorities that need disproportionate emphasis in the 5 years ahead. Then we will organize the rest of the plan around those priorities and establish a goal and objectives in each of those areas, and come back to you again with a proposal for that for your adjustment. And then finally work out objectives and action items under each of those. So you can see us 3 more times during this process. Next slide. So what is strategic planning? Next slide. I think strategic planning is a deliberate and disciplined effort to guide why an organization exists, what it does, and how it does it. With an organization like the Water and Light that's been around for 140 years, it probably seems pretty obvious, but it's not a bad idea to step back and think about that for a bit. Also, it's a time when the organization envisions its future and develops specific goals, objectives, and actions on how to achieve that future. What strategic planning is not is a method to predict the future. Nobody did a strategic plan in 2019 and laid out a strategy on how to deal with COVID. It's not a substitute for the judgment of leadership either. Sometimes folks that are on public boards think if we do the strategic plan right, then when the really hard budget decision comes up, we can just pull out the plan and the answer will be somewhere in there on page 19. You know, you still got to make hard decisions. It's seldom a smooth, predictable, and linear process. Often there's stuff happening that isn't obvious at the beginning of the process. And if we're doing it well, we'll make it come up. And sometimes that's disruptive. And it's also not a list of everything that you do. It's good for an organization to have a business plan that says, here's all the stuff that's there and what the budget for everything is. That's not a strategic plan. A strategic plan is, given the current situation and what's happening, where do we have to, what priorities do we need to focus on for a while now? And where are we going to shift more emphasis? And if you don't make those decisions, then, you know, my sense is if you have 15 goals, you might as well not have any goals because you want to know where to focus. So it's like trying to identify where those critical things are. So you will find us pushing back on, you know, and there will probably be staff members who are frustrated because whatever they do all day isn't on the cover of the plan because they're doing it fine. And we don't need to change what that's happening. Why do a strategic plan? To clarify the organization's goals and directions, address significant strategic problems, or take advantage of opportunities. It's a good time to think about what are those, to set priorities that inform decision-making, especially budgeting, and to increase accountability and improve performance. It's hard to know, it's hard to hold somebody accountable if you haven't said what they're going to do. When to do a strategic plan, when there will be major changes in how the work gets done, when you need to prioritize resources, when you need clear direction to move forward. In meeting with John and his team this afternoon, you know, there are a number of things on the horizon that they think need to be thought about. And so this is going to be a process where we think about that and engage you in those conversations. The components of a strategic plan start out with some foundational statements: vision, mission, guiding principles, intended impact, and theory of change. What is it? What is the organization? What does it believe in? Then there are some strategic priorities, as I mentioned. What's important now, because it's now. For each strategic priority, a goal that says, where are we trying to get to? For each goal, a series of objectives that are specific, measurable, time-limited things we're going to get to here by when. And then some actions on how we're going to get there and performance measures on how we'll know if we got there. And then finally, at the end, I like to step back and say, okay, now that we've done all that and kind of gone down to the weeds for a while, what are the big moves that we all can remember, that you as commissioners can remember when somebody in the grocery store says, what the heck is it that you're doing in the water and light? You'll remember what are those 3 or 4 things that we said were really important. Which I know you've already had that conversation and wished you could have remembered because you get put on the spot. So together, all of that is a strategic plan. We're right at the beginning. I have 2 questions for you and I want to tee it up. First is, what are the major issues facing McMinnville Water and Light right now? We had the same conversation with the staff. And I want them to keep their mouth shut because I want to hear from the commissioners right now. But what are the issues that you think are facing you in the 5 years ahead that need to be addressed? And then the second question is, what questions do you have, big questions, that you hope would get answered during the strategic planning process? So we're going to come back and 3 more times, and by February, we're going to have a strategic plan. What are you curious about that you hope we will have worked through by then? So I'm going to stop talking and see if I can get you all to say what you think about those. Andres is going to take notes.
Thank you so much. Why don't we go around the room and Chair Tankersley, would you mind taking the lead on answering the questions?
Sure, thank you. I'll be one voice on this. I think what I see the big major issue is whether we're going to be able to continue to provide economical, reliable, and environmentally responsible power and water for the citizens of McMinnville for the next 5 years and for the next 50 years. So we need to look at both those issues, and so that's the big part of it. The sub issues in my mind are, that I understand we're gonna have to deal with, are workforce issues, pressures on our rates, because what we charge impacts the community in lots of ways, not just their power bill, or their water bill. And whether we're gonna be able to continue to plan for the long range. I think that's important. And I think another issue is workforce. How are we gonna continue to have the high quality of employees that we've had before? That we really need to, we need to do more than we did before, I think, to develop and maintain those folks. So those are my ideas after, a minute and a half to think about it.
That was pretty good for a minute and a half.
Took 2 minutes to say it.
Thank you very much, Chair. And Commissioner Christensen?
So I would not disagree with Commissioner Tankersley. I think that the enduring value of water and light is the efficient and effective systems that we provide at a rate that isn't out of line with that. So it's not a sort of for-profit mentality. It really is the greater good of the community. And I think there's going to be a significant pressure on this enterprise to be able to deliver on that, because this community is growing and there's lots of outside pressures. And there's significant properties that are in play to be developed, which Water and Light will be a partner in making that happen. But we've got to, I think there's going to be defining moments in how we deliver those services and still be able to be a partner in the growth of this community. And the value that Water and Light provides is the historic perspective of knowing how to make decisions that have long-term impact. That is, I mean, there are very few entities in it that have this history.
Yeah.
And have from their very conception was that we are here for the greater good. Not unlike the city government, right? Like that, it is very much in line with that. But the enormous investments and the way that we've had to save money to be able to do that, that I want to make sure that this organization is healthy and able to do that. I think when I think about workforce, it's more than just the people who work here. It's how do we grow them into new positions if they're interested? How do we open up opportunity for existing staff? Because I think recruitment happens from within. It's going to be very hard to attract talent into a community that has high housing prices right now. I mean, if we're looking in the next 5 years, that's not going to change. So how do we grow our own as an organization? And then I have 100% faith in the people that do the work here. So I would listen to what they had to say and probably want to support, their vision of what needs to happen as well. I think this is an extraordinary organization. Then I would just put this in. We were talking earlier about emergency preparedness. This enterprise will be important in that process, and I do not want them to take second position in those discussions. This organization can be a robust partner in that, not only for the city of McMinnville, but for the county and quite frankly, the region. It can set an example of how a utility can be a leader in emergency planning. And I don't think we should rest on our laurels, having gone through 3 major emergencies in the state of Oregon in the last 3 years. We need to be better prepared because we're not prepared. And if we as a community rely on others, I will tell you that is not a good plan. So that's all I have to say.
Great.
Wow, great job. I feel like you got the questions ahead of time. I know you're just that great. So I appreciate it. I
feel like, thanks to Tom and to Jody both, I mean, I think workforce development is a conversation that happens with, every major entity in this area and, across the state in America right now. So a constant challenge. And I do feel like there's a lot of commitment on Water and Light's part to think internally and think about growing our own and think about connecting with partners. And I think that is a critical thing that Water and Light needs to continue to do. And I think not just in workforce development, but also talking about, emergency services, disaster planning, and system, keeping systems to be reliant, as I feel like we have to depend on everybody to partner together to make sure that happens when there's a crisis here. I think in a small community, there's a lot of connectivity amongst agencies, but I don't know if there's enough deep planning that needs to happen. And it needs to be everybody stepping up to the table when we have a crisis, and everybody needs, as Jody spoke earlier, people need to know their roles and responsibilities and capabilities and what their neighbors' capabilities are, so that we can be as responsive as we can to that. So I feel like having a major utility that's water and electrical, the disaster planning part, that all is going to come here very first. The second that something happens, then what is the response going to be for that is critical.
My turn, I guess. My comments might be more tactical than strategic. Employee succession. That is I think an important issue. His position is all about succession. I mean, he interviewed for the job years ago, and we hired another person and said, your goal is to make sure he learns how to be a general manager, because we want to keep that guy. We have lots of people there that are that way, but I think we maybe need to have a more formal succession planning in that. I still issues around alternative power sources. It may be some of the things have been off the table for a long time, but it may be that we want to look at our dam system again. We have the ability to generate power because of that system. One of the things I guess I'm we're a very typical business in McMinnville. We buy a product wholesale electricity. We develop a product, from ground up water. We sell both those products and we provide services related to them. So we have payroll, we have people, almost, 60 people is all part of a very similar business in that. Because of COVID, we really, I think we gave our employees as much latitude as was humanly possible, protect them and their families, and in doing so, maybe put our business at risk a little bit from a service standpoint, maybe. But we have kind of succumbed to that and found out that we could operate 4 days a week, employees like that. But the reality is we're a business in McMinnville, and we're a service business. And I happened to be here last Friday when somebody had a problem, and I was around beating on the windows trying to get someone. John luckily heard me or something and came out, and the guy was without power, and our system was down to somehow the guy drove into town to make contact. And it was like, maybe somehow we have a skeleton crew just answer the phone. And, it's great for the employees, but is that good for us as a business and for our customers? I don't think so. I think we need to continue to grow the watershed. We haven't really been out looking that much. I mean, we have, but kind of like, hey, if something comes out, but I think that's just all the more as we grow, the more protection there. We've got to finish the development of our second water source, and in developing that business plan is, who are we going to get as customers to buy wholesale water from us to make that be functioning. Then I think another thing that I'd like to see us do is review us as a business, how we're structured, and we went through different changes in that and migrated people from one part to the other and stuff. But maybe have somebody come in and say, okay, I'm going I'm gonna be the efficiency expert, and I'm gonna look at this business and could it be managed, done better, because we've developed our direction with inside and, you know, basically development path. And then the last one, and that's the elephant in the room, and it's the two men sitting at the opposite ends of this table that have over 70 years of history with this company. We're not getting any younger.
Speak for yourself.
And this is a board I guess situation, but at some point in time, Tom and I are not going to be here for another, we will not be here. I'd love to be here for another 35 years, and you would too, but it's not going to happen. At some point, we're both going to have to say it's time for us. And we've done such a wonderful job for the last 35 years, appointing people, selecting people that made this place work. And these boards have been so cohesive, and everybody pulling on the same rope. You can just go down through the history and see it. And so we just, that's the key here, because the last thing we need to have those people coming to a meeting, having four of us ragging on each other, that kind of stuff. You know, it's an honor to serve here. It's also a really important job. So somehow we got to talk about that too. So thank you.
You said development of, and I missed the key word there, development of properties or development of watershed.
Development of the watershed.
Yeah.
Right. Thank you, commissioners. My thoughts on this are very generally similar or in line. The notes that I had made in advance were about continuing to focus on the redundancy of the water system, and I think that I hadn't thought of it in terms of growing our watershed or in terms of evaluating alternate sources for power, but or for water. But generally that line of thinking, whether it's focused on things that are already in play. I do believe in strategic plan development, that you also, you bring forward the work that's already happening, and then do rely fairly heavily on the values that are already set forth of the organization. So I feel like that type of focus is really important. I have been excited to hear about some of the workforce training that Water and Light is already involved in and engaged in with SEDCOR and our local educational institutions, and including the public school system. And I think that ties in, that workforce training and workforce recruitment ties in with good collaboration with those types of entities. And so I will echo those sentiments as they came up before. And then the kind of I would say I didn't have continued emergency preparedness on my list because, as I mentioned earlier, I see Water and Light as having led, but I think it's important to note here too, because of course the only way to stay in a leadership position is to be continuing to think about the future and continuing to plan for it. So I echo all of those things. The things that I would add that I think are important at this moment in time are, one, that we talk about or get some clarity around the relationship between Water and Light in the city. Historically has been very good. I feel very good with Water and Light in the city, but we all know that there have been tensions, including a proposed lawsuit. So I think this strategic plan is a good opportunity for us to address some of those questions and have good clarity and understanding of roles and functions to hopefully not only get people working on the same page, but to hopefully avoid going back towards any type of conflict in the future. So that would be very important. And lastly, in the values of water and light, one of the values is to foster a culture of trust, communication, diversity, and innovation. And I think what goes hand in hand with that is diversity, equity, and inclusion training. That's something we're also working on at the city of McMinnville. I think it's especially important because some people recoil thinking that that's something that somehow that type of training is focused on some very narrow scope of people, when really it ties in with everything else. It ties in with how people are accessing the products that Water and Light is selling at all levels. It ties in with recruitment and workforce training, and really it's really kind of an umbrella that touches into many of those things. And since that hasn't historically existed, I think that is important to bring in. And I read in your company description as well that that's something that you focus on. So it seems like the timing is good in that front as well. And those are my thoughts. Any other thoughts from the commission answering these two questions?
Thank you. Mayor, if I may, can I ask one more sort of lightning round question for a kind of a soundbite answer from everybody?
Please.
So you're all dedicated volunteer public servants serving on this board. You take your role seriously, obviously very thoughtful answers here. I know for sure that sometime in the last couple of months, you woke up in the middle of the night and went, uh-oh, I'm on the Water and Light board, and what are you afraid of? Just in a sentence or two.
It goes along with what the mayor just talked about. I am very concerned about the relationship between the city and the Water and Light Commission and the Water and Light Department. And I'm very concerned that the city, and maybe they've gone beyond this, I don't really know, but they've looked at us and our rates as a way to fill their budget holes. And
so the relationship with the city and money.
Yeah.
So I lay awake thinking about a lot of things, but related to at our last meeting, we took a vote on a rate increase. And it was the first time in my tenure where I felt the weight of that vote. In that it was a robust conversation about is now the right time? What does it mean? And how does it fit into other sorts of things that are happening? And that it gave me pause, and it was, I think, one of the first times that we voted where there was a nay. On one level, it sort of gave me pause. On another one, it was like, we're doing our job and we shouldn't all agree, and we should be able to have civil discourse. And in that moment, I thought about the relationship with the city and how can we get there? We do not need to agree on everything, but we need to have a place where people can speak freely and be able to express concerns. And we also need to be able to listen. The situation has emotion attached to it because there's some critical things that need to happen, but how do we create a more favorable relationship?
Again, the relationship with the city and money.
I think right now, the last few months, more than anything else, just come to realize that all the partners in the community are not necessarily on the same page, and all the people are not talking outside of meetings and strategically working together to, strengthen partnerships or make partnerships. And I think even though I've lived in this community now for over 25 years, I lived in bigger cities all the rest of my life, and I think I'm always shocked when I come to one of these small towns. I did a bunch of work in a town close by, and I was shocked that the tiny little ecosystems, you know, the public education and the city and the county were not aligned and did not have similar thinking, and in some cases didn't even get along. And I feel like that ties to so many things that are important for us to do here, from money to emergency planning to, you know, just having a viable and healthy city and making good choices. We don't operate in a vacuum. And I think that the whole community needs to be making good decisions, and that requires partnering.
Community partnerships. Yeah.
And I think she's referring not to just big agencies or organizations, but we're talking about the guy on the street, the average person in MW&L. You know, what is their sense of us today in October 18th, 2022 compared to, say, 2 years ago? I mean, the paper has people making comments, and there was one about rubber stamp, the water light board rubber stamps, everything the city does or something. And it was so far off base, it wasn't funny, but anyway.
So community partnerships, partnerships with community, partnerships with.
Yeah, I'm just trying, but that's Kathy's. Interesting enough, there are some consistent things I've laid awake over the years, and these guys have heard me say this. It's the what if. What if we woke up tomorrow morning and we lost our largest customer? What if we woke up tomorrow morning and we couldn't sell timber to subsidize water? Out of those conversations, we've made changes. That's why water makes its own bed these days. That's why our agreement with Cascade Steel is it's a cost plus thing. If we lost them, yeah, it would be bad, but not like it would have been in the 80s. And the other thing I lived so in fear of, and last week was one of those days. One of my employees, his mother, they live in Salem, but there was enough vibrations from the Lebanon earthquake that she has an older home, and it created enough vibration. One of her posts broke in her patio, and down went the patio partially.
Wow.
I bring that home and live in fear of the big problem in the Coast Range and our dams. We lose those dams, we not only have got major losses related to damage, but water.
Right.
And that's why it's so incumbent upon us to get that second source put together stuff. So I mean, I worry, because I mean, we can't sell water. Well, we're gone. We're out of business, folks. And we don't have anybody close by that we can run the hoses and like we can to other cities here. So yeah. Anyway, yeah.
Mayor, what are you worried about?
The thing that keeps me up at night reading our city charter, not waking up, but trying to have clarity, is it does continue to be the relationship between the city and water and light. But to me, that's not just a funding question. To me, it's more having clarity about how these two entities function, these two connected entities function. And it became very obvious to me over the last couple months that there's not cohesion in those thought processes about how the two entities function. So I think that's something we need clarity on more than anything. Well, I don't want to say more than anything, but that I think it has to be we have to address it. And I think we have an opportunity to address it thoughtfully and in a very positive way and a very engaged way. And on the flip side of that, I think the scary part is if we don't address it, then those roles get figured out in other ways, right? Then those roles get figured out by things like the two entities landing in port, which would not be what I would prefer to be spending my time in office overseeing. I'd much prefer to spend my time being involved in a strategic planning process that helps us answer those questions so that we can move forward and be productive together and do these other large things we need to do that do take the collaboration and like emergency preparedness and workforce training, etc.
Remy, if I could add and help you here. So we have, someone's been involved in the city planning commission, city council, pushed in the mayor's job because of a resignation. And she comes to our meeting and our council says, this is how this reads. She goes back to her other hat she has as the mayor with the city, and those attorneys say, well, that guy's all wet. And you've actually went through quite a few attorneys that have substantiated the issue that you're driving at about authority and that, and we choose to believe Sam and support. So the poor mayor is kind of, she's got too many bosses, so to speak. And I don't know, I mean, she mentioned court, but I mean, how do you, when the attorneys don't agree, how do you do? And it's all about definition, trying to figure out who's on first, so to speak.
Right. So, I mean, I think, getting into the strategic planning process is also facilitating a way to have those conversations. To hopefully, I mean, it's my hope that this is not an answer that needs to come about in a courtroom. I don't feel like we're anywhere near that, and I hope to be able to keep us very far from it. But it will take open, thoughtful dialogue, and I mean, I do have 35,000 bosses here in the city of McMinnville, and I don't always get the same direction or the same information. But that is it has to be. It's why it's so important to me that it gets folded into the strategic planning process, is to see if we do have a way of answering some of these questions. Without there will be conflict, right? Indefinitely, there's conflict when people know they're starting from two different points of view, but that doesn't mean that there's only one pathway of resolving that conflict. So I would like to fold it in now and hopefully have a plan for how we can come to a place where we have some agreement.
Thank you all. This was a great way to get started. The immediate next step is we'll be working to schedule a one-on-one conversation with each of you, with Andres, to kind of get your individual perspective a little further. And then we're working to schedule a work session in November to talk about the strategic priorities and sort of response to this assessment phase. And Trina will be working to try and find a date that'll work for all of you. So we can dedicate one full session. Sure.
So is the strategic plan focused on the enterprise and how it does its work?
At the end of Sorry, guys, we're running my entire vineyard through the winery today. I didn't mean to interrupt. I apologize.
Is the strategic plan of the enterprise?
How it does its work, or is it around sort of capital improvement, sort of the tactical things that Commissioner Gormley was saying about the expansion of the water system and making sure that, I mean, is it sort of, or is it both?
Well, first of all, you're the commission and I serve at your pleasure, so you can tell me, but I think I certainly had in my head before you asked the question that it was the first thing you said, it was the enterprise, including, the technical. I mean, to me, it's at a higher level with who are you, what are you about, what are the big issues, and then how are you going to get there is largely the work of your professional staff and your day-to-day work, but it's sort of identifying what's really important.
But I think back to what Jody's saying is, you are the professional and we want to hear what you have to say. And that was really a question. I mean, just because we're the board, tell us, are we all wet? That's
so we're The consultants in this case are facilitators.
Okay,
Your staff are the utility professionals. And, we're not gonna come look at your data and tell you, you need to
Okay.
buy 10,000 acres or something. That's not our expertise. Our expertise is to try and get all of you on the same page and your senior staff on the same page about what needs
but
to
I think
happen.
what Jody's saying is if we're developing a strategic plan, and I've read a lot of tactical stuff, you say that's tactical, that's downline, and I mean, we don't, I guess I don't want to adulterate the strategic plan. We want it to be pure and.
Or to put it another way, not that you would tell us what to do, you're way too smart to do that, but if you were to tell us which, in your experience, is the most effective way for a board to utilize your services, would it be strategically or tactically?
Strategically, absolutely. And to me, I mean, I've never worked in a community that was better at managing itself than McMinnville. First of all, I'll say that. And I've never met a consultant that knew more about what was going on in a community than the folks that live there. And although I've heard a lot of consultants act like they do. So I think our job is to help you all think strategically about what you're doing and what are those important issues. And that doesn't mean in any way whatsoever that Ed's tactical thoughts don't belong there. They're probably in the objective and action place than the high level strategic priority, but they may help us recognize it. They may help us figure out what the priority is as we're talking about it. So that's our job, is to figure out sort of where does it fit and how does it all go to there, and what are the hard questions that you all need to talk about. And I'm actually delighted that I asked that last question, because you all acknowledge what's driving you nuts, and you were on very similar page about what's driving you nuts, whether or not what. So to me, we're going to spend some time there, trying to figure that out and figure out where you are with the relationship with the community, relationship with the city. Some of those, that's one of, it appears to me at this moment, based on the experience I've had in the last hour, that's a pretty big deal. And, and I heard a lot from staff, and I heard again from you all about workforce. That's clearly, one of the big issues. And that's our job in the first month of this process, is to sort out what are those big issues. And that feels like doable, at the moment, like I kind of I could probably guess right now where we're going to end up in a month, and we'll see. And then once we have those buckets, we'll spend some time on each of them, figuring out what we're going to do about it.
So let's talk about workforce just for a second. Kathy's heard this, but we went out to hire a meter reader. Tell this board how many applications you had.
117.
That speaks volumes to me as someone that hires tradespeople. That there were 170 people apply. I mean, and we have
113 of them work for you now.
The irony, I mean, we have that with everything. So it's where we have trouble screening. We have so many people apply.
Where I think the industry is going is it's the higher level technical jobs which we've talked about. It's the trades, it's the engineering, it's the accountants, it's the IT professionals. That's where you're going to struggle.
The other thing that I am hearing, and this is with one of our big organizations here in McMinnville, is that they've been able to attract some really, maybe you told me, really high caliber people, because they're allowing them to telecommute. And maybe it's a hybrid model that maybe a couple of days in the office, the rest of it at home. And that has been an issue with the couple. I mean, Linfield had a heck of a time trying to get people to come, and they want to live in Portland. They don't want to live here and stuff. So I mean, interesting situations. Last thing, Trina, I want to start a binder, and the system we have, it's so cloistered that I've never quite figured out how to print anything. You've tried to show me before how to do it, but could you print this agenda item?
Yes, from the commission packet.
Yeah,
Sure.
it's got the slides in it and all that and stuff. So anyway.
Yes.
We have basic
And-
system issues as well. We can't print them.
No,
that's
me.
me.
I said you need a different consultant for that.
Did I make it, so you understood? I want to start about
Yes.
yeah, okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Hey, thank you
Thank
guys
you.
so much. Good seeing you.
Thank you.
Was it 45 minutes, Trina? You didn't?
Yes, that was pretty close to 45 minutes.
They were laughing about how long it was going to take as I introduced myself. Anyway, so you said half an hour, it's at 45 minutes.
Yeah.
Remy, are you doing okay?
We're doing okay. Sorry about my interruption there.
Listen,
Everything stopped.
like I've said you more than once, guess what? Business, you got to, I mean, this is the most important critical time of the year for you. So if you have to step away, please do.
I've got
Honestly.
a good crew out there. Thank you. I just sorting line stop and I needed to stick my head out and see why. And I apologize for not hitting mute before hollering across the room to see what was going
We're used
on.
to that. The other boards were on, yeah.
If you'd like, I can take you out to the sorting line. It'll be a slightly different view. Well, why don't I keep it going? We have a personnel services contract with Chad Hudson presenting, I believe.
Yes, thank you. Keeping with the theme of planning, we're gonna switch from strategic to facility planning. I think it was pre-COVID. We actually presented to the commission some of the ideas that staff has had relating to the facilities, kind of some of the shortfalls, some conceptual plans, if you will, the facility that the staff had gone through. Then since COVID kind of got shelved, and it's kind of rearing its head again, but we're really looking to gain some traction this time by going out and hiring a consultant to look at our current facilities. Kind of assess what we have, number one. Are we utilizing our space the way we should? Can we utilize it better? Maybe, maybe not. And if not, then what do we do moving forward? And kind of looking forward, you know, this facility has lasted us, what, 35 years? It's done a really, really good job. But kind of looking forward out to that next 35, 40, 50 years and what that would look like potentially. So we did go through a formal solicitation process. For this, we weren't exactly sure where the price was going to land for this assessment. It landed well under the formal threshold. So we got 6 proposals. We had an evaluation team internally. And the number 1 ranked proposer was Soderstrom. Soderstrom has done very similar work at Montville Power Administration, some of their maintenance facilities there. They did it at Port Angeles, their light utility there. Oregon State University, also their maintenance facility there. So they do have very good background in this type of work. And so we are looking for commission approval tonight to award that said contract to Soderstrom, pending a notice of intent to award and no.
Who's going to be the captain or running this?
Dan Van Kalkar.
So Soderstrom's worked with McMinnville before. I think they did the remodel of St. James that was done, what, I don't know, 7, 8, 10 years ago. So yeah, so they've done stuff with them. Yeah, so they're one of Portland's big firms, well known.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Chad, do you have any concerns about them?
I do not.
No. Sam, is this a motion, resolution, or what you going to
This is a motion, and if the action requested language in Mr. Hudson's memo would be a good motion. If you're looking to approve this would be a motion to approve the award to an engineering and architectural service contract to Soderstrom Architects for a facility space needs study and conceptual site plan for a not to exceed price of $118,780 per ORS 279C 110 and OAR 137-048-0220 regarding the formal selection of engineering and architectural services, and authorize the mayor and clerk to sign the contract pending a notice of award and no protest being filed.
So moved in the contract
So
in the.
I'm sorry, I have a couple of questions.
Oh, sure.
Can I do that? Should I wait until you make the motion or?
I'll second for discussion, and you can ask your question.
Yeah, so the motion would be what Sam
What I just
said,
read.
with the clarification that the contract is the contract that's attached to the staff report. That's the contract we're talking about, and that Sam would be authorized to make minor non-substantive changes if they come up in the process. So that's the.
Thank you. Commissioner Tate, you had a question?
I'm sorry, I did have some thoughts around this, and I think probably because it was in the packet with the strategic planning, it had got me thinking a lot about all of this that we're doing and the timing of everything. So obviously, I think this is a great thing to do, and I think it's necessary after 30 years. It makes a lot of sense. But I just, I just had some thoughts around where does this fit with our strategic planning? Like does one come before the other, and is there anything that would come out of the strategic plan that would have any kind of impact on how we look at facilities and what we do here? So that's one thing. And I think a big part of the strategic plan from conversation, obviously, it's where I sit, is to talk about community partnerships and work towards working for emergency planning and emergency services. And we had this incredibly tight and great relationship with every other entity in the community. This asset here, these grounds and all of the facilities and the ability to expand and do things on them, that's right here in the, in the core of the city. Seems like if you had fantastic partnerships, you could do maybe some more strategic things to do things together. As far as building, like we talked about, if somebody would have come in and helped to build the fuel facility with us. So that didn't work out this time, but are there other things where those could be thoughts? And then, so I'm just thinking about things. And then I think the other thing is just to think about, I think a big part of this was talking about administrative staff and customer service and office space, and that's something that's severely lacking here. And we're talking about even maybe an additional building or something to do that. But I also feel like we just went through COVID and the world has made a giant shift, and workforce has made a giant shift. And I look at like this giant company, Nike, and I look at the campuses and all of the things that they did that have been sitting empty for years now. And even now that they're thinking about bringing workforce back, it's going to look completely different than it ever looked before. Like people are only going to come in 2 or 3 days, a less number of weeks. They're going to share spaces. People aren't going to have assigned desks and offices. And I'm not suggesting that I think any of this is the way that things should look, or that I think Water and Light should do anything differently. I'm only bringing all this up to make sure that it's a part of the conversation. I mean, remote work has become such a huge thing, and I think there's businesses that have rethought what does office space look like and what do facilities look like. And so I just want to be sure that either now or as we move through this process, that it's both tied to the strategic plan in whatever way we can think about, and that we also really think about what does workforce look like over the next 20 to 30 years. What is that? I'm done. I'm so sorry.
So I want to riff on that, and so thinking about things about employee retention and the types of facility that employees need. I'm in no way indicating this is going to be a part of the plan, but childcare or drop-off sites or sort of places that employees can say, wow, that makes my job a lot easier. That might come out of the strategic planning process. It also might be a result of ongoing workforce conversation. So my question to you is the timing tied to something? Or could this contract be executed after the strategic plan? Or
It could, the part, we might have to renegotiate the products, but it's not tied to anything, I guess, to
but
answer
it's
your
probably
first
part of
question.
your work plan right now. We've got capacity.
Right.
Right, so
Yeah.
built that
And
in.
part of this is gonna go on longer than the strategic plan.
Yeah.
So this is gonna go on after, the facility plan is gonna go on after. It's got a longer time frame.
Right now, it reads to May 22 and
So we could
2023.
have the opportunity to bring in the learning from the strategic plan into this process.
There, yes.
And I would also,
That might be helpful.
I would
You
also,
can let the architects know that that's going on, and they're gonna wanna know.
But I mean, Ed, unless John and Chad tell me that we have to get this done right now, I'm convinced by what Kathy and Billy said, that we ought to put it off, and I'm prepared to withdraw my motion. Unless you guys tell me that, no, there's a real, I mean, you've got a workflow issue, we've got to get going on this, or you can't wait for another, that it's supposed to be done in February, right? The strategic plan, is that when it's supposed to be finished?
They could do the, would it hurt to do the
Assessment
assessment?
piece.
We had that information to then match with the strategic plan, like, does that make sense to do?
so
There's you're saying.
we have the two pieces. There's a assessment part. And then there's the next piece, the conceptual piece. Not all of this is tied to that, because remember, there's also other things going on. For example, we're looking at warehouse space. That's not going to change with the strategic plan. I mean, that's going to be, we are out of space in the warehouse, and with supply chain issues, we have to do something. We have our wire reels sit outside. They rot outside. Now we have to go back through and actually physically try to get the wire off those reels and look at those things. So there's a lot of other pieces that tie to this. Going back to your point, we're going to look at, one of the things we're going to look at is having some type of emergency operations. We have nothing now. So we have nothing to do any of that kind of work right now. We go into the crew break room to do that. So there's a lot of other pieces besides the office space that is tied.
But it would be nice if that is a, something we're looking
Yeah.
at, that we think about from a community standpoint, how does that become a different kind of a resource?
And that may lead us to something like having a separate building where you could have access for the community, but not access to the whole facility,
Right.
because there are potential things that we don't want people in the facility. So there's those thought processes that have to go on. So
So what are your recommendations?
I think we should move forward, because I think this is going to lead, we have the strategic plan happening, we're going to have this happening, and then it's going to lead into the next budget year on what we're going to do and start picking up pieces of this, of the facility.
But do you agree that maybe for some aspects of it?
Oh, yeah, I
there's
think that's
probably is
right.
tied into this?
There's going to be a tie into this, I think so. One of the
There's
things-
stopping points, and we could
Yeah.
freeze it, but I mean, but I think this is a document that we can blend part of it. We also can roll it up and put on a shelf. Yeah, but the craziness is that while we're wanting to do strategic planning, the phone rings and we still got a business to run. We're still running out of wire and we're still having problems. So we got all these, and that's kind of what has driven this is the change and that kind of stuff. So
It's the change in our work processes, not necessarily for the office, but for the crews as well, because vehicles are bigger. We can't put them in the building. We can't maintain them the way we want to within the. We now have vehicles sitting outside in the pull shed.
And I wasn't in any
Right.
way saying that
No, I know.
absolutely see that this has to happen.
But I think the first part of that is we've got to get the assessment done. What do we have today?
And I think if you think about it as physical assets and human assets,
Right.
right? So
Mhm.
there's physical assets, those are monuments that aren't gonna move, right? There's
Right.
vehicles, there's wire. That's gonna need a place to go, but how do the humans do their work, and how do we make sure that we build a facility that accommodates the current way people work, right? So
architects are really sensitive to that. I mean, they really are. That's their
Right.
their bailiwick.
So would it be possible to renegotiate this so that they do the assessment now, because we know we need that no matter what, and then they slow down the other part of it, the recommendations on what to do until we finish the strategic plan and have more ideas, more.
Along the.
That's what I was just.
So we,
Asset. You, yeah.
so the term of the, I think we added a date in there of May, gosh. I'm gonna use-
May, it's
It's-
May of 2023.
Yeah, May of 2023. And I think there is a logical demarcation point where we could stop. We do the evaluation process, or what does our facility look like and are we using it to the best of our ability? That might be a place where we hit the pause button. Logically,
The contract probably doesn't allow us, as it's written now, to hit the pause button. Same.
It's
a T&M
contract.
Yeah, I'd have to. I
It
would
actually
say I
has
would-
two separate tasks. So the first task is the assessment. That's what I was looking at, which looks like ends sometime in January, and then task 2 would start sometime in late December, early January.
So we really want to push it out just
Maybe
a month or two.
Yeah, so that's something we can probably just have a conversation with the architect about.
So back to Kathy's point. Interesting debates about offices and the operation offices. Psychologists are now weighing in on the group think. And there's some real divergent thinking and debating that people work best as teams and they need to get back in the office and that's going on and stuff. And
Yeah,
but
That is not, you know.
But that's, but anyway, this will be interesting that we think about the statement that we talked about 10/18/22 a year from now. What? How would things now? I'm going to throw a couple other things out. Around the country, the building trades in their outreach to bring diversity within the trades, the first thing that pops up in interviews, and we see that important with the pipe trades, is when you have people with families and the lady wants to get in the trade, you offer childcare. The trades in different areas are going together to build daycare centers. And the pipe trades have tried to do that with through volunteer system that, but I mean, we know that is a real issue with daycare. And so there's a whole bunch of organizations within the last 5 years have gotten started. There's a big conference called Women's Build Nation, that those things get discussed. You got a conference in a week, and we're seeing that change. So honestly, maybe as things change, we'll have to think about every place have right now. If you had an employee that was nursing, you need to provide.
We've already had this.
You need to provide space.
Yes, we do. We've had this.
So I mean, this goes back to this study about what are we going to do as we change and
I have 2 employees that just have had.
Okay.
Well, and I would suspect that people that you're working with.
Sorry, Sam.
Have a modern viewpoint on this.
It actually talks about it. If I'm
So what I was going to go back to
task one,
Kathy's
which
other
is
point about
evaluation,
remote work.
and task two,
When we were doing
task
remote
one
work,
ends
we
with the
brought
requirement
employees
that they
back. They
consult
did not
with
want
RMI
remote work.
about task one.
And so it's some
for
people,
proceeding to task
do,
two.
some
So
people
maybe
don't. What
that's
we
at that
found is
point,
that
we tell them.
they didn't like it
Or
because they were
both
not
engaged, this
that
is what
was
we're going to do and make sure they're okay with it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Right. I mean that.
Loves remote work. I think that here's an opportunity to sort of go 2 tracks, right? Like, they want to be around others and those who want to be limits.
Yeah.
And there is also some thinking about, it does tie into workforce development and, was brought up earlier. I mean, when you live in communities of certain sizes, and you need certain capabilities, and obviously not feet on the ground people, but, minds in a chair, sometimes having a broader net and being able to get out is not a bad thing. So, but I think these are all conversations down the road for strategic planning, and they just happen to tie into this.
What I was going to also say is what I think is more important than the remote work is flexibility in their ability and time to work.
Go to a doctor's appointment during the middle of the morning Not being given
A
any time.
few minutes late because they have to drop their child off at daycare.
So
PTO.
two things. One, I think the architects may be talking to us about this some of these sort of things
Sure,
already.
I can imagine.
But second, talk to Sam briefly, quietly here, and it appears that there's a section in the contract that says they won't start task 2 until we tell them that it's okay on task 1. But rather than just sort of spring that on them in December or January, I think what we ought to do is we ought to make sure that they're okay with that and understanding that we may put off the May date may be extended by a couple of months. And so
You want to modify your motion?
I'd like to modify my motion to include staff being able, subject to staff being able to reach an agreement with the architects that would allow this to mesh with the strategic planning so that we can include that in their step 2.
I'll continue to second that motion, please.
And thank you. That was a great,
Yeah.
that was a great catch. Thank you.
All right, so I believe we have a motion and a motion by Chair Tankersley and a second by Commissioner Gormley. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And those opposed signify by saying nay.
It's good, that's good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Because the old days, we all both had hair.
Yeah.
Yeah. The old days.
That was a great catch.
Thank you. All right,
Yeah.
we now have a request to set a public hearing. And I think we have Jamie Phillips presenting again.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
So I'm going to talk about PURPA.
It's not called PURPA.
It is called PURPA.
Don't you love the acronym?
Public Utility
Hospital Board.
Regulatory Policies Act.
There you go. That's delightful.
Established in 1978 to promote energy efficiency and conservation and for utilities to incorporate small generation. So over the years, standards have been established under PURPA. Try not to say it.
On purpose? Is that
Try being on the hospital board and the acronyms that the hospital industry uses.
As a result of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act last year, 2 new provisions or standards have been added, and utilities are required to begin consideration of those standards by November 15th of 2022, and then make a determination on those standards by November 15th of 2023. The standards relate to demand response and electric vehicle charging. And commencing consideration will take the form of a public hearing. So my request this evening is for the commission to direct staff to set a public hearing for November 15th, 2022 to begin consideration of purpose standards 20 and 21 and publish public notice.
so how will we give
Consider.
the public information so that they can participate in the hearing meaningfully?
Sure. So the intent is to publish notice, this explanation of the hearing, and to start that hearing with a staff report explaining the standards and our plan for consideration, which will include our cost of service consultant reviewing some rate designs around these things, and the hearing will be continued.
Oh, good. I was going to ask.
For a future date, so that we have time to go through that to receive public comment. And
Perhaps allow the public, once they've seen the staff report and seen what's happened, to then contribute again.
sure, yes.
Okay.
So, Jamie, would it be important to have commercial businesses and particularly around the electric charging stations? I'm thinking about businesses that might be thinking about that as a future offering, hospitality industry, the education.
And that's why we want to include our rate consultant, because we may have to have specific rates for those types of loads.
Is there,
There usually are.
is there discussion in this also around, I think we had a discussion at some point about putting these at residential, like people adding charging stations at their home and the
That's
sort of
part of this,
repercussions
yes.
of how that affects what, whether they can actually handle that load and
Right.
whether things are sized properly. Does that all tie into this conversation as well? And that there'll be expenses maybe for the
Right.
homeowner to upgrade their systems to accommodate.
Plus there may be expenses for us as well.
Right.
And that'll all be a part of this process, this discussion.
Yes, so it's a comprehensive effort, or the electric vehicle charging standard in particular requires utilities to consider measures to promote greater use of electrification of transportation. So that could be rate designs, infrastructure. So it's kind of a broad review of electric vehicle charging programs. So it will be, the public hearing will be continued to a future date, long enough to have time for consultant review, public input, staff.
I'll probably anticipate a date that we predict that we'll have a rate hearing of some kind in the future.
Right.
So will the consultant do community outreach?
No, but that could be,
We have to do it.
something that we
Notice.
make a determination
I
on
think that's a
separately.
critical piece of this. I know there's one business that doesn't have a charging station and they're using another business's charging station. And it's causing an issue because there's so many people wanting to use it. So I think businesses are gonna start thinking about how they can build their own. And I wouldn't be surprised if future home building, builders are thinking about how they include those as well. So I think there needs to be some sort of community outreach in this
Yeah.
process.
The future homes, they'll actually be set up for basically to plug in. So they're gonna, do you remember, was it 20? I don't remember. There's already state, I think it's in the state building code where they're gonna have those.
Right, yes.
So you have to have a dryer plug on your front porch.
Yeah, right. So, but I think the thing that we, as a utility, need to be thinking about is what that does to our infrastructure from that home. Not only up to our substation, the transmission, but also what it's going to do to our power supply.
So what are we talking? Are these 50, 60, 100 amp? These fast charging things?
They can vary. In the home, I've seen is the Tesla can go up to 80 amps.
So most homes are not set for that kind of load.
That's right. So normally what.
And we aren't set for that.
And so normally what you'd have to do is you'd have to regulate that. So that, but the thing to remember is we only have X amount of fuel. That fuel is the water. And so BPA is going to have to look at how they augment the spreader system to meet those demands. And that's part of our 2028, post 2028 contracts.
And as I understand it, some utilities have a rate, and the rate is depending on when you charge.
Right, it'd be a time of use type rate.
And so that's to level out the use. And then I've been reading, it depends on where you are. That may be different, because if you're in the sunny areas, they actually want you to charge during the daytime.
Right.
Where here you might want people to charge in the middle of the night,
And those are going.
maybe.
Maybe.
Sam, is this a civil motion?
Yes, this is a motion to set a public hearing November 15, 2022, and begins consideration of purpose standards 20 and 21 and direct us to publish notice for that hearing.
So I have a motion.
So moved.
Second,
I have a motion from Commissioner Tate and a second from Commissioner Christensen. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And those opposed, say nay.
We must have
Motion passes unanimous.
Have to be complicated.
Our next action item is to direct general counsel to distribute evaluation forms to commissioners for completion and return to the general counsel. Mr. Justice, I turn this over to you for further information, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So yes, it's we've completed another year, so come back in.
Here we are once again.
Once again for a review of our general manager. So this is a process that really began last year when the commission really appointed Commissioners Gormley and Tate to be a review committee for the general manager for the course and meet with him on a quarterly basis over the course of last year. So I understand that you've been doing that, but tonight we just need your direction for me to distribute the general evaluation forms to you all so you can kind of help them along that path so we can get another evaluation completed. We'd anticipate coming back to the commission possibly as early as next month. Typically, it hadn't been happening until December, but just depends on how the evaluations come back, the timing of that. I'll put those together, get those to the review committee. They'll have an opportunity to meet with the general manager. And then if all things work out, we may come back in November in executive session related to the evaluation, any action we take in an open session, any wage adjustment or anything like that. So anyway, if the consensus is for that process to move forward,
Yes.
I'll go ahead and do that.
You notice the two of them nodding their heads and
Yes, please.
Okay.
and we're going.
Please, go ahead. So in order to, in order for it not to be too big of a burden for you to get things prepared for November's meeting, when would you like to see the commissioners, reviews?
Well, well, and this is our meeting in November actually comes pretty early, so it's
Right.
November 15th. So yeah, if we're going to do it in November, you probably need to give them to me in the next couple of weeks.
So
it'd
if
be
we're
nice
gonna
to
do it in
have them.
November, I'm gonna be gone.
Right. Okay.
And so I think
So maybe that
this has drug on because of me being gone last
okay,
year
maybe
too.
so, maybe so. And so it's worked. I think for the last few years, this review hasn't actually occurred until December.
Yeah.
So it's not, it doesn't, as soon as you can get me the reviews back, I'll try to get those out to you all by email.
And John's okay with if Kathy and I meet with him in December again.
Okay, so we may, I guess what I'm hearing.
We would
is
come to this. But we can do this. I mean, I can do the November one. We can do it Zoom. One.
Right, but I guess what I think
it's-
what Commissioner Tate's is raising is to get all the reviews back to me so I can get those all put together and get them to you to look
Yeah.
at. For you to have time to meet with Mr. Dietz to get all that done. Historically,
That's right.
you don't usually get that done in November. It usually takes, it happens maybe in November, but it doesn't get to a meeting until December. So
Yeah, we bring our reports in December.
yeah, so that
So
may be,
we should maybe just at least commit to have those back to you by the next meeting. At the latest.
that would be very nice.
What did you say?
You can send those to us electronically then.
I will send them electronically.
Okay.
Did you say by the next meeting? Was that the deadline?
Yes.
Yes.
Right.
Yes, okay. Great. I usually have to call everybody on the council to get their, evaluations done. I'm assuming it's not going to be an issue with this group. Everybody's.
Well,
gonna-
there's someone that's you can't see right now that sometimes gotta, make the phone call to, but anyway.
Sam's good at calling people. You don't have to do it, really.
Okay.
Everybody's good.
So I think the consensus is yes, please do that.
Okay.
And thank you for your patience, because I think originally we started out to do this in October as it related to when you got hired or something, but anyway. So.
Thank you. And then I'll continue to call on General Counsel Sam Justice to call us into executive session.
Okay, and do you want to do this as just one, in one fell swoop, or we can come back in the open session and return?
I've got company visiting, so I want to get out of here as quick as I can, so.
Okay, well, maybe we'll plan on going to executive session and then coming back and do both of them and then come back out. So we're going to go into executive session pursuant to ORS 192-660 sub 2 sub F to consider information and records. They're exempt from public disclosure under ORS 192-355 sub 23 relating to identifying security measures and individual building and information processing. We'll also be in executive session after that for pursuant to ORS 192-660 sub 2 sub E to conduct deliberations of persons designated to negotiate real property transactions. If there is any press with us this evening, you're warned not to share information from the public, from the executive session outside of that session, although I don't think there's any, I don't know that we've had any press with us. And then we will return to an open session, I would expect within a half an hour for any action items. So we will come back into open session after the executive